Well, good morning to all of you. I just wonder if it's possible to put the house lights up a little bit so that I can see all these wonderful people who are here to be happy or to learn how to be happy, hopefully. Thank you. I want to start off by bringing a new voice into this space. I'm sure it's never been heard here before. It's the greeting call of the wild chimpanzee. It's hello. Now, I was thinking about this word happiness. This isn't a subject I've ever talked about before or really particularly thought about. But when I was thinking about happiness, it seemed to me it's a state of mind that we desire. It's a state of well-being. And there are sort of different levels of happiness. There's a sort of quiet, contented happiness. And there's a joyful happiness. And there's an exuberant happiness where we want to jump around and hug people and show that we feel really, really good. And the question is, that I'm asked so often is, do animals feel happy? And can you prove it? Do they really feel happy? I think that the question also is, do they have emotions at all? Or is that something unique to us? Is that part of our evolutionary heritage? And are we separated from the other animals? It used to be thought so. When I first went to Cambridge, having been 1.5 years with chimpanzees, I was told that animals have no personalities, or we couldn't talk about them, or minds, or emotions, because those were unique to us. That's how the thinking was in the early 60s. It's difficult when we start thinking about emotions from a scientific perspective, because I know when I'm happy, but I don't know if the way I feel when I'm happy is the way you feel when you tell me I'm happy. And if we're with people of a different culture, it's even harder to know whether the feelings that we have of happiness are the same. And of course, with a different species, it's even harder. James was just talking about his teacher's cat, saying she was dozing in the sun and feeling happy. I think most dog owners would absolutely agree that at certain moments, like dinner time or told they're going to have a walk, and the dog is jumping around, that he's happy. That's what we all think if we spend time with dogs and cats. And I think anybody who's spent a meaningful time with animals understands that we're not alone in having emotions, but it is difficult to prove. Chimpanzees are a wonderful species in which to learn a little bit more about these things, because biologically they're so like us. The DNA of humans and chimpanzees differs by only just over 1%. The blood and the immune system are the same. The anatomy of the brain is almost identical. It's just that ours is a little bit bigger. So it shouldn't surprise us to find that indeed they do have intellectual abilities that we once thought unique to humans. They can generalize, they can think in abstraction, they can learn in captivity more than 400 signs of the language used by deaf people in America, American Sign Language, and many other things which we didn't know when I began studying them 50 years ago. And in their behavior too, we see so many amazing similarities: nonverbal communication, kissing, embracing, holding hands, patting one another on the back, long-term bonds between family members, between mothers and offspring and brothers and sisters that are supportive and affectionate and can last throughout a life of more than 60 years. And when it comes to emotions, again, it's really hard to prove, but we see emotions that mirror those that in our species we call happiness, sadness, fear, despair, anger, rage, guilt, and so forth. And I think it makes the most sense to look at two infants. First of all, a human infant. We know when they're well fed and they've had their nappies changed and they're lying gurgling and cooing in their cot and perhaps waving a rattle around and smiling. We see a happy infant. We know they're happy. Then we see a chimpanzee infant lying beside his mother in the nest, and he's waving his arms around, and he's making little smile movements with his mouth, and he's behaving exactly like that human infant. So probably he's happy. If we take an older child, a happy child, dancing around with excitement because they've been promised a treat, leaping up and hugging the mother or father or whoever is there, and clearly showing great happiness. Well, a young chimpanzee who's seen good food or is surrounded by a big group who are sort of looking at the child starts to show off, spinning around, dancing, flinging their arms around their mother's neck, behaving in exactly the same way as a human child. So why wouldn't they be feeling similar? And why wouldn't we call that happiness? With an adult human, well, I've already talked about that. We all know how we behave when we feel happy. And we can be very exuberant. And we can also fling arms around each other's neck. Go and watch a ball game and see how the fans behave when their side scores a goal. It's very much like chimpanzees who've suddenly seen good food. Very exuberant, hugging and slapping one another on the back. And chimpanzees do exactly the same. So what the chimpanzee does for us is to prove quite clearly there isn't a sharp line dividing us from the rest of the animals. And we're not the only beings with personalities, minds, and feelings. And so we get a new respect, not just for the chimpanzees, but the other amazing animals with whom we share or should share this planet. And we can think of not just the dogs and the cats that we share our lives with as having feelings of happiness and sadness on the other side, but also, well, you've all been reading about these cows and the abattoirs and the transports. They have feelings too. And so do some of the other animals that we use and abuse. All of them can feel a state, I believe, similar to what we're talking about, happiness. So clearly for us and for the other animals, happiness is a desirable state. And we tend to think, many of us, certainly me, as of childhood as being one of the happiest times of our life. I think we don't have the responsibilities. And providing we have a decent family, among the lucky ones on the planet, then it is a carefree time. And I remember such happy times, climbing my favorite tree, being with my dog Rusty, going out for walks on the cliff, out in nature. Just wonderful, wonderful times. And we seek to recreate times like that as we go through life. And I think one of the big tragedies is that so many people feel that with money they can buy happiness, and it doesn't work that way. It really doesn't work that way. I've known so many people with a lot of money who don't seem to me to be very happy individuals, and I've known hundreds of people out in the developing world who have what we would consider almost nothing, because we tend to put our standards out there and feel that people can't be happy unless they have a house, a car, a deep freeze and things like that. But the people out in Africa that I know have so little by our standards, and yet they're laughing, they're singing, they have time to spend with their families and children, and they certainly seem to be very happy. And if you ask them, they tell you that they're happy. So I think the happiest wealthy people that I've met are those who acquire their wealth or inherit their wealth and use it to give. It's giving that seems to make people feel really good, feel happy. And so it's finding a meaning, a purpose in life, a reason for us to be here. And I do think we're getting tired of this materialistic society that we're living in today in the Western world. Question, is it possible to hope for a better world, a happier world? What about all those millions of people living in abject poverty? What about the millions who are starving, having less than one good meal a day? What about the millions who are sick? What about the ethnic violence and the war? And then if we come to what we've done to the environment, you know, there's a really burning question here. We are clearly the most intellectual creature that's ever walked this planet. We've sent people to the moon. Think of the technology that we've developed as a species, what we can do. And so, if we are, and I'm sure we are, the most intellectual being that's ever walked on this planet, how come we're destroying our only home? And I think you all know what I mean by that, about the destruction of the rainforest, the spreading of the desert, the shrinking freshwater supplies, the terrible pollution, the climate change, the loss of species, loss of biodiversity, along with all the human suffering, all the social problems out there. It's pretty grim. What's happened? It isn't that we've lost happiness, although sometimes along the way it seems that we have. I think we've lost wisdom. I'm sorry that we didn't have the elder to give the blessing of the Aboriginal people, the true owners of this land, because I found that among the Aboriginal people and Native Americans of North America and the First Nation people of Canada and other Aboriginal people, that there is a certain wisdom where major decisions are only made if we ask, how will this affect our people generations ahead? And now we're saying, how will it affect me now? How will it make me happy now? How will it make my family happy now? And these are the kind of criteria, and we've lost that ability to always be thinking into the future. And that's what's gone wrong with our world today, I think. So it's not surprising that as I travel around, and it is 300 days a year, that I keep meeting young people who seem to have very little hope for the future. And they're not happy. There are those who are depressed, those who are angry, and most of them just apathetic. And they seek happiness in drugs and alcohol and things of this sort. So that's why I created this youth program, Roots and Shoots, which is now in 127 countries. And it's a program which has as its main message, every single one of us makes a difference every day, and we have a choice. Every single one of us matters, and animals matter too. It's about respect. It's about respect for all living things. Every Roots and Shoots group chooses between them 3 different projects to make the world a better place. By and large, it's youth-driven. The youth get together. They use this amazing ability we have, which does differentiate us from the other animals, including the chimpanzees. We've developed a way of communicating that enables us to learn from the past, to talk about the distant future, to discuss ideas. And so these young people sit down and discuss ideas. What is it that makes them upset, angry, or depressed? Is it something to do with homelessness? Is it animal suffering or human suffering? Is it the destruction of the environment? Every group chooses 3 different kinds of project, which they do between them to make the world better for people, for the other animals, including domestic animals, and for the environment that we all share. And this program began with 12 high school students. It now includes members of all ages, from preschool all the way through to university, with more and more adults wanting to form groups. And when people ask me, Dr. Jane, where do you get the energy to travel 300 days a year around the world at your age? It's because of the young people. Therein lies my hope. Young people who are energetic and determined and passionate and hardworking and very often inspired and sometimes courageous. Once they know what the problems are and are empowered to take action, it's all about rolling up your sleeves and getting out there and doing something, not just learning and talking about it, but actually doing. And whether it's raising money and creating a no-kill dog shelter in China, or whether it's getting together weekend after weekend and removing invasive species from some habitat, or whether it's going and volunteering in soup kitchens or to work with the homeless. It's a way of giving to society. One young boy of 7, he asked me, why is it important to do things? for people in our society. And I said, well, you know, you've had an awful lot from your society, your parents and the society they live in, and it's good to pay back, don't you think? And he said, yes, it was. When I asked a group of young people who were with me in Roots and Shoots right at the beginning, I asked them what it had meant to them. They were all grown up now and out in the world. And they said different things. And one thing was interesting. One of the Tanzanians said, I discovered that doing things to help made me feel really good. Several of them said, well, what we found was that we felt a little bit alone because we didn't think other people were passionate about what we were passionate about. And through Roots and Shoots, through the internet, through meeting people from different places, we found that we were not alone. And we shared this in common. It made us strong. But all of them said, we had such fun doing things together with people who shared our beliefs and philosophy was fun. So you see, they were happy in doing what they did. I've seen it change the lives of children in refugee camps who started off depressed and apathetic. And when they started making organic gardens and raising chickens, they changed. And they greeted me with shining eyes instead of apathetic, slouching figures. So it's being involved, it's giving to society that is really going to make us far more happy than spending our lives getting more and more money for more and more stuff that we may not even want, let alone need. So that's what Roots and Shoots is all about. And I wanted to end coming back to the chimpanzees. Of course, these days, as you probably all know, they're losing their habitat, just as all the other large animals living in wilderness areas are losing their habitats. And the chimpanzees have given us so much. They really have helped us to understand what it means to be human. And they've given us, as I said earlier, a way of understanding why we should have respect for the other animals out there, and a way of coming to terms with the fact that we are not the only thinking, feeling beings on this planet. And so that these ambassadors from the other animals to us should be facing extinction in the wild is truly shocking. Numbers have plummeted from nearly 2 million 100 years ago, as far as we can tell, to at the very most 300,000 today. And those 300,000 are spread over 21 nations, and many of them, like the precious chimps in Gombe, are in tiny isolated fragments of forest surrounded by bare fields. And you saw a little bit about our Take Care program, and that is an effort to improve the lives of the people living around these wilderness areas, a program that's now spread to other African countries. And because these people then become our partners, they're helping to save the environment for their own future, but also for the chimpanzees. It's a program that's worked. We've been told it's one of the best in Africa. And it's in these villages where you would say, oh, they don't even have a bicycle, some of them. No proper roads. But there I have found the happiest people. They sit around a fire in the evening, they tell stories, and we're losing the ability to tell stories. And they seem to be very happy, and it makes me feel happy to know that through our Take Care program, we really have improved their lives and given them better reason to feel happy. So I wanted to end with one last story about the chimpanzees, because it's one of the happiest moments in my life. We all have different things that make us happy, different things that make us tick. And if we could all divide ourselves up into groups and make lists of the kind of things that make us happy as individual humans, I'm sure they'd fall into categories, and they would reflect something about the personality of the people and probably their upbringing. You know, as I said, I was lucky. I had a childhood. I could be out in nature with my dog, riding a horse. And so that's what makes me very happy today, is being out in nature. 300 days a year on the road, it's sometimes difficult to find peaceful time out in nature. Even my precious Gombe, I only get to twice a year for short times. But this story, it happened in the first year of my study, when the chimpanzees had been running away and running away. And although I was living in my childhood dream, which was to go to Africa, live with animals and write books about them, we only had money for 6 months. If I didn't see something exciting, that money would run out and there would be no more money to replace it. I would have failed. So fortunately, one of the chimpanzees, whom I named David Greybeard because he had a beautiful white beard, he began to lose his fear before the others. And one day he came into my camp because there was palm trees ripe there. He wanted the fruit. And I wasn't there, but my cook told me when I got down in the evening. And he came again the next few days, and he found some bananas, and he took them. So I asked my cook to put bananas out for him. Gradually, he got quite used to us because I stayed down to see who it was. And then when I was out in the forest, a group of chimpanzees ready to run off, and if David was among them, he would just sit there calmly, and they'd look from him to me, and back again and think, well, she can't be so frightening after all. So gradually he led me into this magic world of the wild chimpanzees that no white person had ever explored in depth before. And they were, again, among the really happiest days of my life, learning new things every day out in the nature that I loved, a beautiful forest on the shore, beautiful Lake Tanganyika. I mean, how lucky can you get? It was fantastic. And on this one day that I wanted to share, David had now, by this time, allowed me to follow him. It was about 8 months into the study, I suppose. And I was following him along one of the forest trails, and he suddenly moved aside, and he went through a tangle of vines and thorns, and very easy for him with his nice sleek hair. But for me, struggling, crawling after him, with thorns catching my hair and my clothes, it was not so easy, and I was pretty sure I'd lost him. But when I came through that tangle, there was David sitting, almost as though waiting for me, and maybe he was, how do we know? So I sat down near him, and lying between us was a ripe red palm nut. And I picked it up, knowing chimps love them, and held it out on my hand. He turned his face away. I put my hand closer, and after a moment he turned, he looked directly in my eyes, and he reached out, he took the nut, he really didn't want it, he dropped it, but with the same movement, he very gently squeezed my fingers. And that's how chimpanzees reassure each other. And so in that one moment, there was this perfect communication between me and an individual of another world. It was a communication presumably based on a language that we shared with a common ancestor 6-7 million years ago, a language, a communication system that we've brought with us through our long evolutionary pathway, as have the chimpanzees. I understood his motives, he understood mine. And after that, he just lay beside me on the ground, seeming utterly content, chewing the palm nut wodge that he'd brought down from the tree. And he was probably happy. And sitting there beside him, thinking about this wonderful being and how far I'd come, I was happy. I was proud. Do you think feeling proud of something is similar to feeling happy? I think it probably is, unless it's an unpleasant kind of egoistic pride. But if it's just this feeling of, gosh, I've done it at last, how wonderful, how amazing, that has to be a very special kind of happiness. So, in closing then, happiness is not really something we can seek, it's something that comes to us. It depends on how we live our lives and how we interact with other individuals. And if we respect other humans as well as other animals and think about their feelings, then we reach out, and because if we feel they're unhappy, it makes us feel bad. That's the wonderful thing about empathy. And if it makes us feel bad because another human being is unhappy or not happy anyway, then we want to do something about it. And if we can, then that's another special kind of happiness. So I think the goal of one of the Millennium Goals, to alleviate poverty, in a way we could say it's to try and make more people in more places more happy, not because of money or wealth, but because of the way they feel inside, because of the relationships they have with the individuals and the wildlife and nature around them. So that is my little take on happiness. To start off this wonderful, wonderful conference on happiness, I hope to learn a great deal more from people who really have studied happiness as their business. And I should introduce my little friend over there, Mr. H, my mascot. And I carry him around because there he is. I don't know if you can see him, but he's goofily sucking his banana with this big grin on his face. And when people see, a little old lady going along with this little toy monkey under her arm, they smile. And smiling is so important. We don't have enough smiles. So please all smile. Thank you.